Chapter 16 Hidden Agendas. As the final light of day faded into twilight, Mara and Kale made their way toward the hidden meeting place, their steps deliberate and their expressions tense. The fading sun cast long, eerie shadows across the landscape, adding to the sense of foreboding that enveloped their approach. The location was shrouded in darkness, its silhouette barely discernible against the dimming sky. The stark contrast between the tranquil, almost eerie silence of the area and the urgency of their mission heightened their anticipation and anxiety. The covert nature of the meeting place was evident in its grim appearance. The building, half hidden by overgrown vegetation and crumbling walls, exuded an air of neglect that only served to amplify the gravity of the situation. The only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves in the cool evening breeze, a reminder of the isolation and secrecy surrounding the rendezvous. Mara and Kale moved cautiously, every sense alert to the possibility of danger. Their journey to this hidden location had been fraught with challenges, not least of which were their growing suspicions about the loyalties of their allies. The promise of critical information held the potential to shift the course of their investigation, but it also came with the weight of uncertainty. The complexity of the conspiracy they were unraveling had already strained their trust, and the prospect of discovering hidden agendas among their supposed allies added another layer of tension to their mission. As they neared the entrance, Mara and Kale braced themselves for what lay ahead. The knowledge that their allies might have hidden agendas only intensified their focus and resolve. They had come this far with the hope of uncovering essential truths, and the path to this clandestine meeting was both a culmination of their efforts and a potential turning point in their quest. The stakes were high, and the shadows that cloaked the meeting place mirrored the uncertainty and danger they faced. The warehouse loomed ahead, its imposing presence accentuated by the encroaching darkness. The structure, once sturdy, now seemed to sag under the weight of its years. Grimy windows, long unwashed and cracked, cast a dim, distorted light onto the surrounding area, while the rusting metal facade bore the scars of countless seasons. It was a relic of neglect, serving as an ideal cover for clandestine activities. The building's very decay seemed to whisper of hidden secrets and unspoken dangers. Mara and Kale approached with practiced stealth, their every movement measured and deliberate. The soft crunch of gravel underfoot was the only sound they made, as they navigated the shadowy perimeter. Their senses were heightened, attuned to the subtle signs of danger that lay hidden in the oppressive silence. Every creak of the building's old frame and every rustle of the wind through the overgrown weeds seemed amplified in the stillness, each one a potential signal of imminent threat. The air around the warehouse was thick with the musty odor of disuse, mingling with the faint smell of dampness and rust. Mara's eyes scanned the darkness with a sharp, unwavering focus, while Kale's gaze swept over the perimeter, noting every detail with a practiced eye. Their shared understanding of the stakes ahead was palpable. The warehouse was not just a location but a symbol of the conspiracy's hidden depths, and their approach required more than just physical stealth. It demanded a keen awareness of the treachery that could lie in wait. The warehouse's facade was barely illuminated by the scant light filtering through the grime-encrusted windows. The structure seemed almost to breathe with the weight of its secrets, its shadowy corners and derelict state forming a labyrinth of potential dangers. The facade, with its peeling paint and jagged metal edges, looked like it might crumble with the slightest touch, further adding to the sense of foreboding that surrounded them. As they edged closer, Mara and Kale exchanged a brief, unspoken glance, their faces set in determined expressions. They both understood that their task was twofold. Not only were they to gather intelligence, but they also needed to navigate the web of deceit that surrounded them. The warehouse was a central node in their investigation, but it also represented a focal point of the conspiracy's machinations, where loyalties were likely to be as uncertain as the shadows that cloaked the building. The stillness of the night was occasionally interrupted by the distant hum of the city, a stark reminder of the world that continued to move on outside the confines of their immediate peril. Within the warehouse's grim walls, Mara and Cale prepared themselves for the potential confrontations and revelations that lay ahead. The tension between them was palpable, an undercurrent of anxiety that spoke of the high stakes and the looming confrontation with the unknown. They moved with precision, aware that their every action could be scrutinized by unseen eyes. The warehouse, with its neglected exterior and foreboding silence, was more than just a backdrop. It was a stage upon which the next chapter of their investigation would unfold. The weight of their mission pressed heavily upon them, each step toward the entrance an echo of their resolve and their readiness to face whatever lay within. The shadows of the warehouse seemed to stretch and writhe, creating an almost living darkness that enveloped them as they neared their destination. The secrecy of the location mirrored the complexities of their investigation, where trust was a fragile commodity, and every discovery came with its own set of risks. With each passing moment, Mara and Cale's sense of urgency grew, knowing that the answers they sought could very well determine the outcome of their perilous quest. As Mara and Cale stepped into the dimly lit interior of the warehouse, the atmosphere shifted from eerie silence to a tense buzz of activity. The flickering light from a few scattered lanterns cast long, wavering shadows across the room, revealing a scene that was both unexpected and unsettling. Several familiar faces, those of supposed allies who had pledged their support to the cause, were gathered around a makeshift table. Their presence here was both surprising and disconcerting. The table was cluttered with maps, documents, and various other papers, their contents obscured by the low light. The allies, who had once seemed steadfast in their commitment, now appeared engrossed in hushed, urgent discussions. Their faces, illuminated by the flickering light, were etched with a mix of anxiety and resolve, their brows furrowed as they deliberated over the contents of the documents spread before them. The contrast between their earlier assurances of loyalty and their current covert activities raised immediate questions about their true intentions. Mara and Cale exchanged a tense glance, their surprise at the scene evident in their expressions. The sight of their supposed allies engaged in secretive talks was a jarring revelation, shaking their confidence in the reliability of their network. The very individuals who had sworn to support their mission were now enveloped in a web of secrecy, their actions hinting at hidden agendas and conflicting interests that were previously unknown. The disorienting nature of the scene underscored the complexity of the conspiracy they were entangled in. As they moved further into the room, Mara's eyes narrowed with suspicion, her mind racing to piece together the implications of this new development. The familiar faces, now associated with a sense of betrayal, were not just allies but key players in the broader scheme of the conspiracy. The realization that their trust had been misplaced added a new layer of urgency to their mission. The once clear lines between friend and foe had blurred, and Mara felt the weight of the situation pressing heavily upon her. Cale's demeanor, usually composed and analytical, was marked by a flicker of concern as he observed the scene. The complexity of their situation had deepened significantly with this new information. His gaze swept over the room, noting the subtle signs of tension and the palpable air of secrecy that hung over the gathering. The unexpected assembly of allies at the warehouse added a sense of urgency and complexity to their investigation, forcing them to reevaluate their strategies and reassess their trust in those around them. Mara's eyes narrowed as she scanned the room, her gaze sharp and assessing. The sight of her supposed allies huddled together, their conversations hushed and their expressions tense, sent a jolt of disbelief through her. The shock of the scene was palpable, but it quickly transformed into a focused determination that hardened her resolve. Her mind raced, piecing together the implications of this unexpected discovery. The trusted figures she had once believed to be steadfast supporters were now shrouded in secrecy, their true motives obscured by their covert behavior. Her frustration was evident as she turned to Cale, her voice a low whisper laced with intensity. "What are they planning?" she asked, her tone carrying a sharp edge that reflected her growing disillusionment. The question was not merely a request for information but an expression of her mounting concern about the true nature of their alliances. The betrayal she felt was deepened by the realization that their mission was far more entangled in layers of deception than they had previously imagined. Cale, standing beside her, absorbed the scene with a mixture of concern and analytical detachment. The revelation that their allies might have their own hidden agendas was unsettling, but his expression remained composed as he processed the new information. The complexity of their situation had escalated, and Cale understood that the presence of these individuals at the warehouse was a significant development. He knew that their next steps would require not only strategic planning but also a careful reevaluation of their relationships and their approach to the conspiracy. As Mara's frustration simmered, she continued to watch the group intently, trying to decipher the nature of their clandestine activities. The maps and documents scattered across the table hinted at plans and strategies that were beyond their initial scope of understanding. The once clear mission objectives now seemed clouded by the intricate web of alliances and rivalries they had stumbled upon. The realization that their fight was against a more complex network of interests made Mara's task seem more daunting. Her growing mistrust was evident in the way she scrutinized every movement and whisper in the room. The confidence she had once had in the loyalty of their allies was eroding, replaced by a gnawing suspicion that threatened to undermine their progress. The sense of betrayal was not just personal but also strategic, as it indicated that the very foundation of their plan might be compromised by the hidden agendas of those they had relied upon. The new layer of complexity introduced by this revelation meant that Mara and Cale would need to navigate their mission with even greater care. The presence of these seemingly disloyal allies required a shift in their approach, demanding that they uncover the full extent of the deception while continuing to pursue their objectives. The stakes were higher than ever, and the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty as they sought to untangle the web of deceit that now entangled them. Cale, ever the strategist, observed the interactions with a careful and discerning eye. His royal training had instilled in him the ability to read between the lines of political maneuvering, and the scene before him spoke volumes. The alliances they had once relied upon were now revealing themselves to be more fragile and complex than they had initially assumed. The seemingly loyal allies were engaged in secretive discussions that hinted at hidden agendas, leaving Cale with a heightened sense of the precarious nature of their position. "We need to uncover their true intentions," Cale said quietly, his voice reflective and measured. The gravity of the situation was clear in his tone as he assessed the implications of their newfound knowledge. His strategic mind was already working through the possible scenarios, understanding that their next steps had to be meticulously planned. The stakes were high, and the revelation that their allies might have ulterior motives required a deeper analysis of the shifting landscape they were navigating. "If these so-called allies are playing their own game," Cale continued, "we must determine how their goals align, or clash, with ours." His words underscored the need for a careful evaluation of the delicate balance between cooperation and competition within the web of alliances they were entangled in. The complexity of the situation demanded that they understand not only the immediate threat but also the broader implications of the shifting loyalties and hidden agendas that now came into play. Mara, who had been grappling with her own frustration and mistrust, nodded in agreement. Cale's insight provided a critical framework for approaching the tangled web of deceit they faced. The need to uncover the true intentions of their allies became a priority, guiding their next moves as they sought to untangle the intricate network of relationships and rivalries. The realization that their mission was now entangled in a more complex and potentially dangerous game sharpened their focus and determination to succeed despite the obstacles. The complexities of the situation became increasingly evident as Mara and Kale continued their careful observation of the hidden meeting. The once clear lines of their mission were now blurred by the myriad of shifting loyalties and ulterior motives among their allies. What had initially seemed like a straightforward investigation had evolved into a tangled web of deception, where each new piece of information only added to the overarching confusion. The layers of intrigue that had begun to surface were not just obstacles, they were potential threats to the very success of their mission. As they watched, it became clear that the information they had gathered was only part of the equation. The shifting alliances and the potential for betrayal within their own ranks presented a significant risk. The realization that some of their supposed allies had hidden agendas added a new layer of complexity to their mission. It was no longer just about deciphering the conspiracy but also about navigating the treacherous waters of trust and deception. Every interaction they observed had the potential to reveal new insights or further complicate their understanding of the conspiracy. Each whispered conversation and furtive glance among the gathered individuals was now a critical piece of the puzzle Mara and Kale needed to solve. The subtle dynamics of these interactions provided clues about the true nature of the alliances and rivalries that shaped the conspiracy. Their ability to interpret these nuances would be crucial in determining the extent of the hidden agendas and the potential impact on their mission. The more they observed, the more they realized that their task was not just to gather information but to understand the intricate web of relationships that underpinned the conspiracy. Mara's frustration grew as she grappled with the realization that the mission had become even more precarious than anticipated. Her focus was sharpened by the need to uncover the true intentions behind each ally's actions. The stakes were now higher, with each new revelation adding to the weight of their responsibility. The complexity of the situation demanded not only their full attention but also a strategic approach to ensure that their actions would not inadvertently play into the hands of their adversaries. Kale, with his strategic mind and careful analysis, was equally concerned by the evolving dynamics. The shifting loyalties and hidden agendas among their allies posed a significant challenge to their mission. His approach was to sift through the layers of deception, seeking patterns and connections that could provide a clearer understanding of the larger picture. The process required patience and precision, as any misstep could lead to further complications or reveal their own vulnerabilities. The need to address these emerging challenges underscored the importance of their continued vigilance and adaptability. Mara and Kale knew that their success depended on their ability to navigate the complex landscape of alliances and rivalries. The task ahead was not only to expose the conspiracy but also to ensure that their own position remained secure amidst the shifting loyalties of their supposed allies. The intricate nature of the conspiracy required both immediate action and long-term strategy, blending their skills and insights to overcome the formidable obstacles they faced. As the meeting proceeded, Mara and Kale remained hidden in the shadows, their ears straining to catch fragments of the conversations unfolding before them. The atmosphere was charged with tension, palpable even from their concealed vantage point. Each participant moved with a cautious grace, their words measured and deliberate, as if aware that their every utterance could reveal more than intended. The room itself, dimly lit and cluttered with papers and maps, seemed to amplify the sense of secrecy and guardedness among those present. Mara's sharp eyes flicked between the figures at the table, noting the subtle shifts in posture and the fleeting expressions that betrayed underlying emotions. Despite the careful decorum, there was an undercurrent of anxiety, a palpable edge to the discussions that hinted at deeper, unresolved conflicts. Her frustration mounted as she tried to piece together the fragmented snippets of dialogue, each fragment a potential clue to the broader conspiracy they were battling. Kale's focus was equally intense, though his approach was more methodical. He observed the interactions with a strategic eye, noting the alliances and rivalries that seemed to underpin the gathering. The conversations revealed not just the external threats they faced, but also a complex network of internal conflicts. Each participant appeared to be playing a double game, aligning themselves with different factions while maneuvering to protect their own interests. This intricate dance of loyalties and ambitions added another layer of complexity to their already challenging mission. As they continued to listen, the enormity of the conspiracy became increasingly apparent. It was not merely an external threat, but a deeply embedded issue with far-reaching implications. The internal conflicts among the conspirators suggested that the web of deceit was even more tangled than Mara and Kale had initially realized. The revelations underscored the fact that the conspiracy was a multifaceted threat, involving not only external enemies but also internal fractures that could undermine their efforts from within. Mara and Kale exchanged a brief, silent glance, their shared understanding evident in the intensity of their gaze. The realization that their adversaries were not just unified villains but also embroiled in their own internal struggles provided both insight and added complication. The conspiracy was proving to be a labyrinthine challenge, where every step forward was fraught with the risk of falling into new traps and encountering unexpected obstacles. The discovery of these hidden agendas was a sobering reminder of the unpredictable nature of their quest. As Mara and Kale absorbed the implications of the meeting, they realized that the straightforward narrative they had initially believed in was now obscured by layers of deception. Their previous assumptions about who could be trusted and who could not were no longer reliable, and this shift in their understanding required a fundamental reassessment of their strategy. Mara felt the weight of this revelation pressing down on her. The certainty she had relied on was now shattered, replaced by a murky landscape of conflicting loyalties and concealed motives. She knew that navigating this intricate web of deceit would require more than just vigilance. It demanded a deep and nuanced understanding of the shifting allegiances within their network. Every interaction, every piece of information now had to be scrutinized through the lens of these newfound complexities. Kale, ever the strategist, approached the situation with a careful calculation. The hidden agendas they had uncovered were not just obstacles but also potential opportunities. He understood that by identifying and leveraging these internal conflicts, they might be able to turn the conspirators' own machinations against them. However, this would require an even more astute awareness of the dynamics at play, as well as a careful balancing act to avoid falling into their traps. The task ahead was daunting. Mara and Kale knew they could no longer rely solely on their previous assumptions. The allies they had once counted on might now have motives that diverged from their own goals, and enemies might possess unexpected alliances that could alter the course of their mission. The challenge was not just to gather intelligence but to interpret it correctly amidst the swirling uncertainty of the conspirators' hidden agendas. As they prepared to move forward, Mara and Kale understood that every step they took needed to be informed by this full spectrum of loyalties and rivalries. Their approach had to be meticulous, ensuring that they were not only reacting to the visible threats but also anticipating the subtle maneuvers of their adversaries. This level of caution was essential to avoid being outmaneuvered by the very forces they sought to dismantle. The evolving nature of their mission demanded a shift in their tactics. The straightforward pursuit of evidence and confrontation was no longer sufficient. They needed to engage in a delicate dance of diplomacy and deception. This would involve forging new alliances, testing the loyalty of their existing ones, and carefully navigating the shifting terrain of their enemies' ambitions. Each move had to be calculated to stay ahead of the conspiracy's ever-changing landscape. As the meeting concluded and the room began to empty, Mara and Kale exchanged a look of resolute determination. The weight of their discovery was palpable. They had unveiled a crucial truth that expanded the scope of their mission. The fight against the conspiracy was no longer just about confronting external threats. It was equally about understanding and maneuvering through the intricate internal divisions that now surfaced. Mara's expression was a blend of frustration and resolve. The complexity of the situation demanded more than just a tactical approach. It required a nuanced understanding of the shifting loyalties and hidden motives within their circle. She knew that every ally and enemy had to be reassessed with fresh insight, and the path forward would be paved with both strategic ingenuity and a steadfast commitment to their cause. Cale, with his strategic mind honed by royal training, was already formulating a plan to address these newly revealed challenges. He understood that navigating this labyrinth of internal conflicts was as critical as any direct confrontation with the conspiracy's external threats. His calm demeanor belied the intensity of his thoughts, as he prepared to leverage the fractured alliances to their advantage while remaining cautious of potential pitfalls. With renewed resolve, Mara and Cale knew that their next steps would be crucial. They had to adapt their approach to account for the internal dynamics they had uncovered, ensuring that their actions were informed by the full spectrum of alliances and rivalries. The road to victory would be challenging, demanding both strategic acumen and unwavering vigilance as they worked to dismantle the conspiracy from within while guarding against its external dangers.